Hi, this is Lori Seiwald, Executive Editor of Adventist Today, and I'm here today with Cindy Chamberlin Eastwood. And Cindy went public with some situation in her employment at the Central California Conference. She went public with that, about 2, 3 weeks ago. And a lot of people started reading it and had a lot of concern. And so I called Cindy and I said, can we talk about this? Because it did seem to be a story of a very uncomfortable, difficult work environment that had occurred there. And so I'm very interested in what happened there, and in the long run, how we can make these kinds of situations work better than they do. So I'm going to start with some basic questions. What was your job, Cindy, and how did you find yourself there? What did you do for Central California Conference when this all started?
Well, thank you. Actually, Lauren, I was the Central California Conference Vice President for Communication, and that included overseeing video production, overseeing the print shop, social media, camp meeting, the 10-day SoCal camp meeting that I'm sure you witnessed when you were there, the production for that, all of the official crises, press releases, and also anything that went into the recorder. So pretty much anything content-based came through my desk.
It sounds like you really enjoyed the work in Central.
I felt like I had arrived at my dream job, Lauren. I even though I worked, long hours that were grueling, I loved what I did. I had a passion for it, and I felt like God had a ministry, and I felt like I was there for that first purpose.
And at first, it went well, apparently.
Yes, at first it was really a dream job. It went well. I was met with a little bit of a hostile work environment. I was sandwiched between some family members, but I thought I could ride that out because primarily things were primarily good.
So you were working directly for the president of the conference.
I was working directly for Ramiro Cano, who was the president then at that time. And when I came on board, I felt like the golden child. I felt like all my work was praised. I felt that I had autonomy to create and do strategic things that I had never been able to do before. That made me excited. I won't disclose numbers, but I had a budget I had never had before. And I was just feeling like, wow, God, thank you. And I was saying, it was all those years of staying home, raising those kids. I was faithful.
Oh, and sadly, though, it didn't last. How did things change? What changed it?
Well, okay, so I was, complimented in public and given lots of accolades and room to grow, room to fail, room. And when I look back now, there were some things that were strange that I just thought, well, they were strange. I remember being asked on my Skype interview with the then president if I was married. And I thought, well, this is Adventist land. I guess they asked that. I don't know if they're supposed to in California. I arrived and there was a single man in the building. There was a pastor that said he had been told I was coming and he was forbidden to date me. And I was just weird things. So I would spend long hours with the president. I felt like, he must think I was brilliant or something. And this was nice to have the ear of an important person. And now that I look back, it was odd. We would spend like 3 or 4 hours in a session talking the weather, breakfast, this and that. We also worked as well. There was a lot of, now that I look back on it, it was strange. There were things, he told me his wife was gone. He didn't know how to wash his underwear. He said he was just loving on me, worried about me, this and that. And then I began dating a pastor in the conference, and that was, I found out, not okay.
So
He
it
asked,
seemed a little inappropriate at times, even though at the time you felt we're just good friends.
now that I look back, and now that I've gotten a job outside, I can't even imagine a supervisor asking those questions. I was begged not to marry. I was asked by Ramiro Cano to take my social media post down, which showed I was in a relationship. He said that someone of my stature should not have a relationship post. When I went to get married, he did try to forbid the marriage. He said that he forbade me to take calls from my then boyfriend on my cell phone in his office, even though that was definitely the nomenclature of every officer to take phone calls. He said no phone calls from Stephen. He tried to stop the marriage, really gave his disapproval, and it
Did he
just
ever
got
say
weird.
why? Did he ever say why?
No, not to me, not to me. He would also compare himself to my boyfriend and say, does he treat you like this? You know, okay, and then saying multiple times, I'm just trying to love on you, just trying to love on you. So I knew fundamentally, without a shadow of a doubt, fundamentally, that things changed the minute I got married. And when I tried to be diplomatic, and I said, well, I need your blessing. And Ramiro Cano said to me, I hired a single person. I did not hire a married person.
What was his style of management, generally speaking?
So I had heard going in, when I announced that I was going there and it had come out in the recorder that I was going to be there, a lot of people at my church and all over kept saying, you know, kind of like, oh, God bless you. It's going to be hard. And they kept saying, Ramiro's better. He's better. And I didn't know what that meant. And obviously at the beginning, I had a lot of time with him and a lot of one-on-one sessions in private with him that I thought he was a good person. So I didn't know what people had been saying. And Lauren, I am under no pretense that Adventist leaders are angels. But again, I had worked for very diplomatic people, comparatively speaking. What I found there at CCC was something that was unprecedented compared to the places that I've worked. And I've worked at Union Conference Church, GC. What I saw that there seemed to be two types of employees. People either owed him something or they were afraid of him. And I was new. I was the newest officer. So these things were startling to me, whereas the other people had kind of come along with this culture. To me, it was people feared him. It seemed like a culture of fear, intimidation, hostility, secrecy. And I will tell you, I have written some crisis releases in my day. I have, but I wrote more at Central than I have ever written in any other area of the church. I felt like there was seemingly little ministry being done and mostly just one crisis after another. It seemed like we put out a fire. CCC had more surveillance, more security gates, more check systems than I have found at the GC.
You had mentioned that he didn't want you to post certain things on social media. What was the attitude towards social media, and how did that play into all of this?
Yeah, that was really strange. He, you know, obviously had monitored mine and asked me to take down my soon-to-be husband. I found it very strange because, again, working with very diplomatic people in the Northwest, I've met presidents, and I'm sure you have too, that if you take them to camp meeting, you have to haul them out to lunch because they're so busy shaking hands and kissing babies. Not this one. And when I would write him into the programming, he was always worried about being overly exposed. I tried to create a social media persona as well. And I said, even Ted Wilson has a social media platform. And he was very leery of that. What I did find was, when I read online, I went, okay, this seems to be a hostile work environment. It basically met like 99.9% of the categories of a toxic work environment. And then he even admitted that some employees seemed scared to even see him come down the hallway. Things were different. I remember one day I can't say the amount, but I signed a very large vendor budget for SoCal. And this had insurance writers, it had multiple pages of legalese, it had on and on and on and on and on. And I was dealing with a professional, and I get done showing it to Ramiro, and he says to me, "We've got to own him. We've got to own him." And I was like, okay, this is a professional man. This is a professional deal. Strange things. Another time.
Well, what did that mean to you, Cindy?
Lauren, I don't know. I still don't know. This is what I felt. I felt it mimicked more of a Italian mafia drama than a workplace I'd ever been involved in. And there was fear. There was legitimate fear. I can tell you people had legitimate fear. Even people that saw what I went through came to me with tears in their eyes and said, "I've got to pay my rent. I'm sorry." He seemed to have this, and things were not dealt with in diplomatic, political ways that you and I are familiar with. They were dealt with, he would ask, is someone strong arming him? After I got married, so the downstairs that I managed had the son below. So I was sandwiched between dad.
When you say the son, you're talking about Ramiro's son.
As long as I had dad's support, Ramiro's support, everything was fine. Everything was fine. As soon as I got married, I no longer had that protection, and I no longer had that respect and that safety.
Tell me about some of the abusive behavior that you have experienced since you got married.
Well, certainly, Lauren, I want to preface this with, I was under no pretense. I've seen politics and I've seen families work together and things. And so I wasn't going in believing it would be the Garden of Eden, but all those family dynamics and things were kept from me until I got married. And then I began in this terrible position of being in the middle. And those same meetings that Ramiro would call me into that used to be fun and friendly and collegial, albeit a little strange, were suddenly, they began to take a very different turn. And I felt they became downright demoralizing by the end, just downright demoralizing. I was called in over and over and questioned over the tiniest things, interrogated, left, 3 hours of screaming. And there were three 3-hour sessions of Ramiro interrogating me. And it suddenly became apparent to me that he didn't want resolution. He was looking for something. He also said, I found you out of nowhere, plucked you out of nowhere, and you were nothing without me, and I can make or break you, and I can destroy you. It was a terrible situation. I'd like to to read just one account. I'll spare
Okay,
you
go
others.
ahead.
It was September 5, 2019. I was called in again to the office upstairs with Ramiro. These were always alone in his office, he and I. And he screamed at me for a 3-hour session. He had a notebook and a pen, and he was writing. And he interrogated me again and again for what would have been a routine procedure in our print shop. And he kept underlining this portion of his notebook. I mean, it just like got like him in his notebook. And he kept saying, "Are you dismissing me?" And I said, "No, I'm not," because I didn't want to be on insubordination for that. And he kept repeating the question over. I kept saying, "No, I'm not." And I felt certain that he was really trying to trap me on something. And I knew that the door was open, but the employee part of me felt I couldn't leave. He wouldn't stay on topic. He wouldn't let me finish my sentences. I felt like I was in an interrogation for which I didn't know the reason. I didn't know the motive. I cried. And I know you're never supposed to cry at work. People had told me as a woman, never cry in there. I cried like a baby. And he went at this for 3 solid hours. And he kept asking me in his session, "Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? You weren't anything when I hired you. You'd be nothing without my support." And he told me, just bold face, he said, "You will be nothing without me." And there were at least 3 long sessions similar to this.
Did anybody else hear these sessions?
I don't know. I did call, that was the first time then that I did tell him. I had called HR on the session before that, and they had offered to go with me. And I said, I've got to face him on my own or he'll never respect me. So I went back in, and after that, I told him that I would need a witness to go into his office again if he were going to speak to me about his family. And that was the last session. And then he was completely open about his hostility.
How did this come to an end?
So I told you, I got married, and then the meetings with Ramiro became very destructive to me. And he went into re-election. We got through that. After that, I had spoken out in a confidential meeting, in a confidential corporate protected executive session meeting. And Ramiro then he was never referred to the floor by the nominating committee. So he did not receive that nomination. You can read the recorder, went back to the floor, went back to another smaller committee, blah, blah, blah. In which case the union then asked us to speak confidentially. And I said I would not speak. And then I was asked, "Will you please talk for 2 minutes?" And I thought, I'm in a confidential place. This is the forum. How can I've read a lot about the Holocaust, and the Holocaust happened because people didn't speak. And we found my family's name on Schindler's List, so I'm feeling like, how can I go back to these tithe payers and tell them I had 2 minutes in a confidential room and I said nothing, and I was asked. And so I spoke to the abuse that I felt, the toxic work environment, the hostile environment. And 4 days later, and that was a protected confidential meeting. And 4 days later, Ramiro stated to me across the table that he knew exactly what I had said. He verbatim stated what I had said. And he said, "I will be cleaning house." We either had someone leak or we did have the capability to record. I don't know, but it was out there. And so then immediately I was served these papers that were, it was stated that they had been voted on. They had not been. It was stated that people agreed. They did not. 4 people came to me afterwards and didn't even know about what was happening. Backroom deals happened. It never went to executive committee, as I believe is mandated by CCC bylaws for an official officer, the department, all of those things. And he gave the bulk, probably 90% of my role, department resources, staff, assets, responsibilities to his son, also which never passed through the executive committee as it is supposed to. His son, I did not receive meeting notices. I did not receive invitations to officer council meetings, of which I was an officer. So I went home and I filed a complaint with the EEOC and the DFEH and workers' compensation. And then I went in and I talked with HR, and HR was trying to navigate some mediation. And so my husband and I went in to talk with HR and with Ramiro Cano. And he was unwavering, and he referred back to the confidential meeting that I had spoken out confidentially in. He referred back to that meeting. And he also stated that he had hired a single blonde woman and I could go home. I got married. I came to CCC to get married. And I remember crying, Lauren, because I wanted to build a TV studio. I wanted to bring the camp meeting programming up further. I felt like I was being told I was a child and I could go home because I got married. My husband then was scheduled to go to a workers' meeting, and he did not take me. I didn't want to go. And he had a one-on-one with Ramiro, and Ramiro told him to go home and control his wife.
And did they give you a formal dismissal from your position?
No, I took, good question, Lauren. I took FMLA. I began researching everything I could on the web. And I was with the FMLA, and we were about 2 weeks before that's to expire. And I got a notice, basically.
Before you go on, what do those acronyms mean?
FMLA is family medical leave. So it would be similar if you're sick, or a pregnant woman will sometimes have FMLA when she has her child. And so I took that as a way to regroup. And about 2 weeks before that was to end, I found out, I didn't know these things beforehand, but I found out that in the state of California, then what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to engage in what's called an interactive process. So say a woman has a baby, before she comes back to work, they're supposed to ask, do you need a pillow? Do you need to go home for breaks? What that's supposed to happen. And you're supposed to have like 24 hours, maybe 48 between that. And you're supposed to let the person come back to work so they can continue paying their rent and paying their mortgage. So I got this letter, and it was demeaning. It told me how to dress. It told me how it was very ambiguous about what my new role would be. It was emphatic that I arrived by a certain date, time, and etc. And so I had hired an attorney, and I had him answer it. And so they had a quick discussion. I had a doctor's notice to come back, that I was free to come back or work from home. I had my attorney said everything was a go. And CCC began then from June until October, completely frustrating the interactive process. And they, at one point, even their attorney went silent on my attorney. And my attorney couldn't believe that real life human beings were acting this way. At one point, they said that I would have to have my attorney be in charge of my work duties. They said that I was going to have to go to an upstairs room, both at the CCC office and at SoCal, like a child in a corner away from everybody. And then someone must have told them that was kind of unlawful. So they then did this whole musical offices. Oh, everybody's getting a new office. But they never came back with the SoCal where they had told me I was going to go to this upstairs room. I mean, it felt like I was a dirty child. And so then I went back. My attorney said, you get yourself in there. So on the day that their letter said to go back, I put on my high heels and I went in. And I think they didn't think I was going to, because 5 minutes later, they sent me home, and then passwords went away. I was not allowed to contact anybody. I had to stay out of the building. More and more my role, people would tell me, like, your sign is torn down that says vice president now, it's torn down. My logins didn't work. And so then I'm like, so every week I write, hello, I'm working from the couch, and let me know if you have any other ideas. And I was writing, I can always write. And I made some phone calls. There was a crisis at SoCal I dealt with, and fielded the neighbors that were mad about something. And, you know, I planned, I went into strategy planning, and all of this. Every week I sent a letter, and they finally just quit paying me.
Without informing you.
They took all my vacation. They said they were going to take my vacation, and my attorney kept trying to meet with them. I have notices from my attorney saying, let's meet. And they just let me sit on the couch, getting rid of my passwords, my logins, watching the son take the role. And finally, I just had to find another job, money-wise. So I actually sent in what was called a construed resignation, and meaning that any rational person would resign under these circumstances. But it never went to executive committee. And now, anyway, you have more questions.
So you have pursued this legally.
So I want to be very careful, Lauren. Yeah. I hated to pursue it legally. I hated to do that. But they wouldn't talk to me. They wouldn't answer my emails. They wouldn't talk to my husband. They wouldn't treat me like anything more than a child. And I hated to do that. I tried Matthew 18. We tried mediation. We tried HR. We tried the agencies.
Now, a lot of people saw this post that you had posted just before Christmas. And this had been going on for some time. What made you decide to express yourself about this at this point?
Yeah, I didn't want to do that. Because of my years in training and writing the best of my church and containing crises, I did not want to be that person. But that week, there was pictures on social media that Ramiro Cano was presenting meetings and mentoring new conference presidents.
Yeah. Where are you at with all of this right now, Cindy? Are you? It's hard to come to a position of peace when you feel like what you've been doing was a calling from the Lord, and you're doing God's work.
It's strange, Lauren, because I wasn't able to advocate for my role. I was shut down. and I had no voice. I think that was the worst part, was I had no voice. And I remember thinking, like Rosa Parks, people have asked her, why did you not move to the back of the bus? And like in this case, they didn't fire me. They just asked me to move to the back. I was asked to be marginalized and not heard. And I just thought, I'm tired. And she said to news reporters, she was just tired. And when I saw that they were parading him at the NAD, I was like, I'm tired. I'm tired of watching and watching and watching. And it didn't just happen to me. As near as I can construct, it appears from my vantage point that it's happened to at least three other people, not in the same way, but in strategically being removed for family or friends. And one person, anonymous, that I will speak of, didn't even understand that they could call the EEOC. And I thought it can't keep happening. And since that time, I've been frightened, but I know I have to go forward.
What's been the response from other folks in Central California Conference? Has there been support? Has there been how have people reacted?
So we have had so much outside support from people still in the building who have contacted us privately, and they're afraid. I also know that it's still occurring. And we've also had a plethora of support from pastors. And my husband is still a pastor in the conference there. And we've had so many people that had already kind of figured it out before I said anything, but they've been very supportive.
He is not the president there now.
No, Dan Cerns has taken over, and I pray for Dan Cerns' role. I knew Dan Cerns in the Northwest. I knew him to be a godly man, and I pray for him.
You mentioned to me that there has been an email sent out to the employees about your statement. Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah, so we were sent this by multiple people. No one has to worry. And I realize I can't thank people. It would hurt them. So I won't do that. Asking employees not to support us publicly.
You sent me the statement. It says, you may be aware of the social media posts by Central California Conference pastor and his spouse. We're not naming the individuals or providing the posts because, in addition to many factual misrepresentations, some of the statements contained in the post may constitute legally actionable defamation, and we do not want to jeopardize the conference or any of you. We are addressing the matter as appropriate, but please refrain from commenting or engaging in any public way with these posts. If you have any concerns, contact the executive secretary. If you desire to communicate with them, reach out through private channels rather than public messages that may put you or the conference as your employer in legal jeopardy. So, Cindy, when the executive secretary writes that the allegations specific to those making the posts have been thoroughly investigated by outside legal counsel, outside independent investigators, insurance carriers, and even reviewed by a government authority, and every investigation completed to date has found the allegations without merit, that the government complaint was dismissed, and the government's investigation found it was unable to conclude this established a violation. You would say that this is not the case.
So I would say that is not the case, Lauren. The insurance carrier would say that's not the case. And the people garnering the rights to sue would say that's not the case. And also, there is still an investigation pending, so they have not all been cleared. So the only problem with that is this was already investigated by the insurance carrier that he's referring to, and I'm going to stay in very broad strokes, but that was investigated, but it was found that injury had occurred by their insurance carrier. Also, we had outside investigations done by EEOC and DFEH. And the way that that works in the state of California is they're investigated independently. And then upon conclusion, you're either dismissed or you're given rights to sue. We were given rights to sue by both the DFEH and EEOC. The charges that were found collectively encompass discrimination based on marital status and sex, harassment, abuse of power, retaliation, and retaliation for whistleblowing.
So you
and hostile work environment.
Well, this is all very complex, and I'm sure those of us who are listening, we feel the pain that you've gone through. And even if we don't understand all the legal complications of it, Cindy, and I'm so sorry that you've had to experience things like this in the church. We always have as you said, you didn't expect things to be a rose garden, but we always do have an expectation that when we work for the church, that we're going to have be treated morally and kindly. And it doesn't sound like it was at the very least, like it was a very kind way of working with you.
I hope the viewer's not thinking I'm angry. I'm more afraid and I'm more hurt. It's sort of the shock look you're getting. It's not, I can make peace, but it just can't keep continuing. So I don't want to be construed, Lauren, as being angry. I'm just shocked. And my attorney, he kept asking, are there real people in the building? They're really acting like this, and
do you actually have a lawsuit against Central California Conference and Ramiro Cano?
So we had to wait in the state of California. It is frowned upon if you have not tried to work within the agencies. And so what a judge wants to see is a judge wants to see the rights to sue. So we have obtained those.
If you could speak to other women working in the church who have struggled in various ways, what would you say to them right now?
What was hurtful to me, Lauren, was that I worked so hard. I prepared for my meetings, I did background work, came in with my charts and files. I worked so hard. And a lot of it's not just a camp meeting, as you know, a lot of it's at 2 a.m. in your sweats, I worked so hard and I gave my church what I felt some of my best years because I wanted to. And to be told, like, I got married, I can go home and not hear my further dreams for strategic growth. It reminded me of when I had published something, a booklet, and I was so proud of it. And I went to my church and my husband, they asked him, about his work and his ideas and his plans. And I thought, okay, they're going to ask me next. And I had this booklet I wanted to show them with my name on it. And they said, nice dress. And that's how I felt. I also felt like, people used to ask me, how did you get here? does your dad work at the GC? And I used to say, no, I just got here one sentence, one paragraph, one story at a time. And they used to say, well, you can't get in like that. And I said, yeah, you can. I really feel that you can get in, but you can't stay.
I want to thank you for being so candid with us about this story and for having the courage to stand up and tell it. We at Adventist today really do hope for a more kind and honest and considerate church. And I think maybe by telling your story, you will help others to be able to learn from it. And so, thank you for being willing to do that.
And to God's glory, again, it's not just my story. I'm hearing from all over the world. This is happening to people everywhere. That there's church work. It's happening, and I think that as the church, we should be above reproach. We need to be above that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. We'll bring this to an end now, and thank you very much.